It always starts with something small, harmless, almost comforting in its predictability, like the way my mom overdresses the salad, or how she places the wine bottle just slightly out of my reach, as if she still thinks I might drink too much and say something inappropriate. The ritual is so familiar it could be a church service, only this one seasoned with passive aggression, veiled jabs, and those long, uncomfortable silences that aren't really silent at all. This dinner was no different. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans overcooked to the point mom insists they just need a little butter. And Lindsay, of course, brought her kale and quinoa side dish that no one touches but everyone compliments. We sat there, the four of us, like miscast actors in a family sitcom that's long overstayed its welcome. Dad nods a lot, chews slowly, avoids eye contact. Lindsay's husband, Todd, isn't here business trip, though I'm half convinced he's already learned better. I sit across from my sister, who's radiant as always. Her teeth practically glow when she talks, and somehow her hair looks better in this lighting than mine does on my best day. She's talking about her kids, naturally, how Jeremy won the spelling bee, how Clara is so advanced for her age that her preschool teacher says they might need to move her up a level. Mom eats it up like it's creme brulee. Dad nods again. I take a sip of water. And then Mom does it. She leans forward, sets her fork down like she's about to drop wisdom from a mountaintop, and says, "Lindsay, honestly, I don't know how you do it all. You're the one we're proud of." The room doesn't go silent. Oh no, that would be too kind. It just hangs there, thick and sour, like old perfume clinging to the curtains. Dad shifts in his chair. Lindsay blushes, shakes her head with that modest, perfected, "oh, stop, Mom" routine she's honed over the years. I keep chewing my chicken, unfazed, not speaking, but something inside me, some thin, frayed wire, snaps. She said things like this before, plenty of times in different ways. Lindsay always had the drive. "Oh, you two are so different. It's all code for you never measured up." But this time it felt like a nail being hammered into a coffin that's been sealed for years. I think what stunned me wasn't even the words themselves. It was how easily she said them, like it was just a known fact, like gravity or the sky being blue, that I wasn't someone to be proud of, and everyone at the table already knew it. I nodded slowly, made a mental note of the wine bottle again, and reached for my water instead. "Anyone want to help clear?" I said it with a smile that felt like papier-mâché stretched over wet cement. I stood, started stacking plates, and Lindsay shot me a grateful look, as if I'd just offered to donate a kidney. "Thanks, Ratch," she said, already halfway into another story about Clara's reading list. In the kitchen, I scraped mashed potatoes into the trash with a calm that felt practiced. I rinsed, wiped, stacked. Mom lingered nearby at one point, drying forks and humming like everything was perfectly fine. I didn't speak until the last plate was in the dishwasher. Then I turned to her. I don't know what came over me, but the words were already forming before I could stop them. I leaned close enough that my voice wouldn't carry to the dining room and said, softly but clearly, "You know what, Mom? You can keep your pride. I've spent 40 years learning to live without it." Her face didn't change right away, but I saw something flicker, like someone realizing too late they left the stove on. Then I smiled, dried my hands on a towel, and said, "Thanks for dinner," as if nothing had happened. I walked to the door, gave Dad a light hug, patted Lindsay's shoulder, and stepped out into the cool night air without a single glance back. There was something about that moment, maybe the way the porch light buzzed like it was about to burn out, or how the air smelled faintly of cut grass and gasoline, that made everything feel strangely final, like a chapter had just ended and no one but me had noticed. I got home, kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of the good red wine I'd been saving, and sat in silence with my phone on airplane mode, watching condensation slide down the side of the glass. I didn't feel angry, not exactly. More like empty, but in a clean, clear way, like a shelf that's finally been dusted. The next morning, my phone was buzzing before I even opened my eyes. Text after text, missed calls, Lindsay, Dad, even a message from a cousin I haven't spoken to since last Thanksgiving. The one that stopped me cold was from Dad. It just said, "Mom's crying and won't talk to anyone. What did you do?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone down, took another sip of last night's wine, and smiled, not because I'd hurt her, but because, for once, she'd finally heard me. There's something eerie about the way silence settles over you when everyone's trying to reach you at once. When your phone lights up with messages from people who usually forget your birthday, who don't call on holidays, who have never asked how you're really doing, but suddenly need to know exactly what you did to make your 71-year-old mother lock herself in her room like a scolded child. I didn't answer any of them, not out of malice or smugness, but because the truth, my truth, felt too sacred to be diluted by hasty explanations or misconstrued through someone else's lens. I spent that morning in a kind of strange, suspended stillness. No music, no TV, just me and my thoughts, packing circles in my apartment. I made coffee I didn't drink. I opened the fridge 4 times and took nothing out. I stared at the wall like it might answer a question I hadn't dared to ask. The truth is, when you grow up as the daughter who isn't seen, Not because you're bad, not because you failed, but because someone else is always shining so brightly they blind everyone else in the room. You learn to live in the shadows. You learn to play the role of the helper, the peacemaker, the one who folds the towels without being asked, the one who drives grandma to the doctor when Lindsay's too busy with more important things, the one who remembers everyone's birthdays, even when no one remembers yours. You get so good at shrinking yourself that you forget what it feels like to take up space. Until one day, you say something that cracks the walls, and suddenly everyone acts like you brought a sledgehammer to Thanksgiving dinner. The silence didn't last long. Around 11, my phone rang again, this time with my brother-in-law's name lighting up the screen. Todd never calls me, not even when he and Lindsay are in town and need someone to watch their dogs, which I've done more times than I can count without so much as a thank you text. I let it go to voicemail at first, but he called again immediately after. And for some reason, I answered the second time, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe just because I wanted to hear how the Golden Sisters' husband would try to guilt-trip the family disappointment. His voice was tight, clipped, polite in that way that always carries an edge. "Hey, Rachel, I'm calling because your mom's really upset. Lindsay's freaking out, says you said something to her, something that really hurt her." I leaned back in my chair, eyes tracing a crack in the ceiling I'd never noticed before, and I said very quietly, "I told her the truth, Todd, something I should have said years ago." There was a pause on his end, like he wasn't sure what to do with that. Then he cleared his throat and mumbled something about how mom hasn't been eating, how she's just lying in bed crying, which, I suppose, was meant to make me feel like the villain of the week. But all I felt was exhaustion, not from guilt, because there wasn't any, but from the sheer weight of carrying so much unspoken resentment for so long, of being expected to stay quiet while everyone else got to be loud and loved and forgiven before they even apologized. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my couch and started remembering, not just last night, but everything that came before, the endless stream of comparisons, the backhanded compliments, the way my mom always acted surprised whenever I actually did something well, like my success was an accident rather than a possibility. I remembered being 14 and grounded for coming home late, even though I'd been out looking for Lindsay, who'd snuck off to meet an older boy she didn't want mom to know about. I took the blame because she cried and said if mom found out, she'd never trust her again. I remembered being 17 and turning down a scholarship to a school in Oregon because mom said she didn't know how she'd manage without someone to help around the house now that Lindsay was finding herself on a gap year in Europe. And I remembered birthdays with store-bought cakes and a single card from Dad, while Lindsay had parties with matching napkins and elaborate themes, and a slideshow of her baby photos playing in the background. All those things had carved grooves in me, subtle and silent, until I didn't know how to stand upright without leaning a little to make everyone else comfortable. But last night was different. Last night I didn't lean. I didn't yell either. I just said the truth in a voice so calm it probably scared her more than anything else I could have said. I told her I was done chasing her approval like it was some prize she kept just out of reach. And if that made her cry, maybe it was because she finally realized she couldn't keep ignoring what she'd never given me. I thought about texting Lindsay, something short and sharp, like asking her why hearing the truth hurt mom so much. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch a little longer, because for the first time in years, it was on my terms, and maybe that's what scared them all the most. When she finally showed up at my door, I knew it was her even before I looked through the peephole, not because she knocked in some special way, or because I could hear the distinct rhythm of her footsteps through the hallway carpet, but because there's a particular kind of silence that follows Lindsay everywhere when she's not in control of the narrative. A tense, hot, invisible fog that tells you someone's about to try rewriting reality to better fit the version where she's still the heroine. She knocked twice, then stood there, no doubt rehearsing her lines, probably thinking she could charm her way out of this the same way she's charmed her way out of every consequence since we were kids. I didn't open the door right away, not because I wanted to assert some kind of power, but because I needed one more second to brace myself for the performance I knew was about to unfold. When I finally opened it, she was already mid-breath, like she'd been practicing her opening line and didn't want to lose momentum. Her face was flushed, eyes wide, lips pressed into that half-smile she uses when she wants to seem reasonable while absolutely seething inside. "Can we talk?" she said, not waiting for an answer, already stepping into my apartment like it was still an extension of the stage where she plays the perfect daughter, the loving sister, the woman who has it all together. I didn't stop her. I didn't offer coffee or small talk or a seat. I leaned against the wall near the kitchen and just watched her move like a storm cloud in heels, packing in that frantic way she always does when something doesn't go according to her script. "Really, you couldn't keep it together for one dinner," she started, her voice high but just shy of yelling, the kind of tone you use when you're pretending not to be furious in public. "You had to make it about you. Do you have any idea what you did to Mom?" I stayed silent, not because I didn't have 1,000 things I could have said, but because I wanted her to fill the air first. I wanted her to unravel without me giving her a single thread to pin the blame on. "She's devastated," she continued, packing hands flying. "She hasn't eaten, won't leave her room. Dad says she's barely talking. And for what? Because you needed to throw some little tantrum over something that honestly wasn't even that big a deal." And there it was, the line I'd been waiting for, the one that always came when Lindsay needed to minimize someone else's pain to keep the spotlight firmly on her own shining image. Not that big a deal, as if 40 years of being overlooked, diminished, and strategically forgotten could be filed away as a minor inconvenience. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You don't even remember what I gave up for you." Her expression faltered for a second, a flicker of something unsteady passing through her perfectly made-up eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, arms crossed now, the classic Lindsay defensive pose. "Everything I have, I worked for. Don't act like I took something from you." And that's when I realized she genuinely didn't know. Or maybe she did once and just buried it so deep under selective memory and family praise that she forgot. I walked past her and pulled out the small box I keep at the back of my closet, the one filled with old acceptance letters, recommendation letters, things I never showed anyone because there was never a right moment to bring up my could-have-beens. I pulled out the letter from the University of Oregon, full scholarship, housing included, an opportunity I never took because Mom sat me down one night, teary-eyed and overwhelmed, and said she didn't know how she'd manage with Lindsay still, finding herself, and Dad working overtime. She never asked me not to go. She just painted the picture so vividly that it felt selfish to even consider leaving. I handed her the letter, let her read it through, and when she finally looked up, her face had softened just enough for the truth to sink in. "You stayed?" she asked, like the very idea was foreign. For me, I didn't nod. I didn't need to. Instead, I leaned in slightly and said, "Remember that night in '98 after your little party at Josh Dugan's house? The one where Mom found your vodka bottle under my bed and you let her think it was mine?" Her face froze for maybe the first time ever. Lindsay had no script, no witty comeback, no clever redirect. "I didn't think you'd remember that," she mumbled, suddenly very interested in the pattern of my rug. I smiled not because I was happy, but because watching her stumble in the face of a reality she thought she'd buried felt like reclaiming a part of me I didn't even know I'd lost. "That night," I said, my voice calm but firm, "was when I decided I was done taking bullets for you. I just didn't say it out loud until now." I walked to the door, opened it, and gestured. She didn't move at first, just stood there staring at me like she was waiting for a different ending. "I told Mom something she's needed to hear for a long time," I said as she stepped out. "I told her, you never loved me, you just needed me." Her hand froze on the doorknob, knuckles pale. She turned, eyes sharp with something between anger and guilt, and asked, "What do you want from us, Rachel? An apology? Pity? A do-over?" I laughed soft, bitter, not cruel, and said, "No, I just want you to remember, that's all." I closed the door behind her gently, no slamming, no theatrics, and for the first time in a long, long time I felt the kind of silence that doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't suffocate you with the weight of unspoken things, just peace, cold, clean, and earned. There's a particular weight that settles over everything when a family that thrives on appearances starts to crumble quietly, not in the loud, screaming fights or dramatic confrontations you'd see in a movie, but in the quieter, more corrosive way, where no one calls, no one texts, and everyone pretends the absence of communication is somehow more respectful than the presence of hard truths. For 72 hours, I didn't hear a word from anyone in my family, not a single ping from Lindsay, not a tentative attempt from Mom, not even from Dad, who's perfected the art of cowardly neutrality, staying a ghost in a house where he long ago learned that saying less makes him more liked. At first, the silence felt like a gift, a strange, welcome reprieve from the constant obligation to perform politeness, to swallow every thought that might make someone else uncomfortable just to keep a peace that only ever benefited them. I cooked meals for one with music playing low in the background. I drank coffee on my balcony as the sun painted light across the buildings, and I let myself breathe without bracing for the next emotional ambush disguised as a loving conversation. But as the second day turned into the third, I could feel the tension creeping back, not because I regretted what I'd said, but because I started to sense with growing clarity that the silence wasn't just a byproduct of shock or hurt. It was a strategy. Families like mine don't fall apart when someone lies. They fall apart when someone finally tells the truth. And now that I'd laid the truth on the table like a rough-hewn stone, no one could ignore it or reshape it. They were all grappling, in their own ways, with how to make it disappear without addressing it directly. Then my phone rang, unexpected and jarring in the quiet of my apartment, and I saw Dad's name on the screen. His name, so rarely tied to any active role in our family's dynamics, almost made me not answer, half expecting it to be a pocket dial or a misdialed call. But I picked up, curious and calm, and after a beat of awkward breathing on his end, he spoke in a voice lower than usual, like he was calling from a confessional instead of his own house. "Your mom's not doing well," he said, with that practiced mix of concern and avoidance he's used my whole life. "She hasn't eaten much, just lying in bed, not really talking." I waited, giving him space to say what he'd called to say, knowing full well his goal wasn't to understand or support me, but to recruit me to fix something I didn't break. When the silence between us stretched too long for his comfort, he added, "I think maybe if you just called her, said something. I don't know, it might help." There was something deeply ironic about the idea that after all these years of being made to feel invisible, I was somehow now responsible for soothing the same woman who'd spent a lifetime reminding me, subtly and not so subtly, that I was less accomplished, less lovable, less worthy of pride. I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but at how absurdly predictable it all was. My mother had spent decades shaping the family narrative around Lindsay, building her into this shining emblem of success and goodness, while I'd been reduced to a convenient backdrop, the older sister who could always be relied on to clean up, to smooth over, to stay quiet. "I think she just needs time," I said slowly, choosing each word like it could be carved in stone. "Time to think about the things she's always chosen not to see." My father sighed, the kind of sigh that says so much without saying anything at all, and mumbled, "Okay, just let me know if you change your mind," before ending the call with a click that sounded final, though it never is. I didn't call her. Instead, I did something I should have done long ago. I wrote her a letter, not a dramatic manifesto or a bleeding heart confession, but a list, a simple, factual list, written in ink on thick paper, folded neatly and slipped into an envelope with no return address, like even the paper itself knew I wasn't expecting a reply. The letter listed the years, the dates, the moments. It read, "When Lindsay got suspended in 10th grade and you told people it was me, I stayed quiet. When you forgot my college graduation because Lindsay had the flu, I said it was fine. When I saw you beaming at her wedding and couldn't find a single photo of you smiling like that at mine, I swallowed the lump in my throat and told everyone what a beautiful day it was. When I drove you to chemo and waited in parking lots for hours because Lindsay was too busy, you told people she never left your side. And at the end of that list, beneath the final line, I wrote the one thing that mattered most. I never wanted to be better than her. I just wanted you to see me." I dropped it in her mailbox late at night, no fanfare or theatrics, just a quiet offering of truth wrapped in the kind of dignity I knew they'd never fully appreciate. 3 days turned into 4, and then without warning something came in return. A letter, no name, no handwriting I recognized immediately, just an envelope slipped under my door in the early morning hours, like someone wanted to return the gesture but couldn't bear to face me while doing it. Inside, tucked among faded old photographs, was a single page torn from a diary I hadn't seen since I was 10. A page I didn't even remember writing until I read the words in my own childish handwriting. "I hope one day Mom smiles at me like she smiles at Lindsay." And beneath it, in different ink, clearly written recently, was a single line in my mother's handwriting. "You were always good enough. I just didn't know how to show it." I stared at the words for a long time, not crying, not feeling any particular rush of relief or forgiveness, just absorbing the strange, hollow feeling of someone finally saying something that might have mattered if it had come 20 or 30 years earlier. I folded the page slowly, carried it to the kitchen, and burned it in the sink, not out of anger or hatred, but because some wounds, once exposed, need more than apologies to heal. They need time, they need space, and sometimes they need to be let go to stop spreading rot. As the paper curled into ash and nothingness, I felt something settle inside me, not exactly peace, but clarity. Sometimes silence is the answer, not because it's right, but because it's all that's left.